Welcome to the first ever episode of the Next Generation podcast. Now, today we're joined by a very special guest, and his name is Michael Maisey. Now, Michael is the author of this book. In the book, he talks about how Michael was abused by his uncle and bullied at school, and at the age of 12, he found the safety he craved in the ranks of a local gang in West London. Michael graduated from shoplifting to armed robbery, and for 5 years, Michael was in and out of Feltham young offenders. He was on a downward spiral of crime and drug and alcohol addiction. Age 25, Michael managed to get sober and turn his life around. Michael's now a businessman, an actor, an author, a speaker, a coach, and he continues to have, a big impact on the lives of those around him. So today we really want to ask Michael a question and hope that throughout the podcast he can answer that question. And that question is change really possible? So great. Michael, great to have you on, mate.
Great to have you on. That was a great intro.
Cheers, mate.
Love it. And my thoughts on this is, I set up the CIP podcast, the CIP project, because I do genuinely believe change is possible for anyone, no matter how bad it's got, no matter how far down the scale you've gone. Like, even if you've completely messed your life up, and I still believe you can change. And I think it all comes back to learning the things that we're not always taught in the classroom, like emotional intelligence, mental health, just a better understanding of ourselves. I think if we really understand ourselves and how we tick, I think we have a much higher chance of succeeding in life at whatever we want to do. But I think, in a lot of ways, we're not educated on a lot of the most important stuff in traditional education. So, I definitely think change is possible, mate, 100%.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, you're doing some great things now. So you've got all these projects, and you're doing the group you did with us for 5 weeks. I mean, that, I don't know about you guys, but it changed my life. Yeah. And I definitely think that what you're doing is just amazing. But obviously, the reason you're doing this, the events that led up to this weren't always great. I know Halim mentioned, but do you want to tell us a bit more about your childhood and what led up to this change and made you into the man you are today?
So I was primarily raised by my mum. My mum came from a Romani gypsy background, so my mum was born in a caravan at the side of a road in Dublin, and she come from a really big gypsy family in Ireland. And then she was taken into care at the age of about 8 or 9 by the nuns in Nazareth, and she experienced physical sexual abuse by the priests and the nuns in Ireland. And when she was leaving the children's home at age 16, her parents came back out of nowhere, and they wanted to wife her off, basically marry. It was pre-arranged marriage to another rival travelling family. So back in the travelling community back then, it was a way of settling debts, settling feuds between families. They'd go, right, my daughter's going to marry your son, and now we're blood related, and the feud is squashed. And my mum didn't want to do it, so she basically she got about £10 or something from the home, and got a one-way ticket to London, where she came on her own, basically. And she still recalls going to hotels and restaurants, and they had signs on the door saying no blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
God, that's crazy.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's crazy. And that was in her lifetime. But she met my dad, and my dad was a young, good-looking, also quite violent and unpredictable young man. But what she saw in him was protection. Having ran all her life from all these type of predators, she saw in him, this guy can keep me safe. But the flip side of that is that he used to drink, and occasionally he'd give her a slap, and sometimes he'd give her more than a slap. And and that was the essence of their relationship. It was two young people who basically were ill-equipped to be parents or have a positive relationship. They just didn't have the tools. Neither of them were shown how to do it properly. And I came along, and before I was 1, we'd moved house about 5 or 6 times on the run from him, because he would find her and there'd be an argument. And then, after that, I was primarily raised by my mum, and around age 4.5, 5, my uncle Tommy came to live with us. And that's when the physical and sexual abuse started. So my Uncle Tommy was also raised by the priests and nuns in Ireland. He got took into the home quite younger. So he was quite a young lad when he got taken in there. And yeah, so a lot of the stuff he learned in the children's home from the priest, which a lot of it was just bullying, intimidation, violence. He just passed on to me. And I remember sort of making this decision I was about 5 or 6 years old, where I made a clear decision that this universe is not a friendly place. The people closest to you normally hurt you the most. The people you're meant to be able to trust normally hurt you the most. And so how are you going to survive as a 5-6-year-old kid? I had no one to turn to. My dad was a heroin addict and my mum was an alcoholic. And so I started developing an alter ego, like a defense mechanism, and he's still a part of me today in a lot of ways, but I call it the security guard. And the security guard basically took the little boy and put him in a corner and said, you just sit there, and now I'm going to handle anything that comes our way now. And so in the playground, someone might call me a name, I'd go from 1 to 10, like that, boom. Also, if a teacher come to me to try and support me and figure me out, I could also meet them with aggression as well, because that's how my Uncle Tommy groomed me. He come to me with love and then he ended up hurting me. And so I was always on guard from predators and people trying to hurt me. Even if people seemed genuine and like they really cared, I would still meet them with aggression. And for a lot of teachers and social workers, they just labelled me as he might have some learning difficulties, or he might have anger management problems. He's got psychological problems. They just wanted to slap a label on it. And so that was it. That was my childhood. I grew up an angry young kid, basically. Yeah.
So Michael, did you feel different to other kids when you were going through all these traumas that other children hopefully wouldn't have been through? Did you feel like you were separate from other people at school? It
was funny because I never really knew that until I started going to other kids' houses. And I remember when I went to someone's house who lived in a house. That was like a real surprise for me, because I grew up in a tower block. I had neighbours above me, below me, and either side of me, so you could always hear something going on. And I went to this one of my friend's house, and he had like a 4-bedroom house, and it was upstairs and down. It was like, I was just amazed by how big this house was. And and then I started tweaking on that a lot of my friends both had their mum and their dad. And it was like, all these things, I started thinking, things are different for me. I'm different to most other kids. And it really became apparent when I got a bit older. When I got to like 12, 13, and I noticed like what I was wearing, like it's all my mum could afford to give me, trying to raise 4 kids, be an alcoholic. We basically just had the cheapest clothes, often bought from charity shops. And that was the real thing where I started to develop this, it's me against them. Like
the world wasn't supporting you, you had to fend for yourself.
Yeah, that was it. It was like, you guys don't get how hard it is. And it's like you guys against me, you guys haven't even got a clue. And where I grew up, our council estate in Isleworth is right next to Twickenham Rugby Stadium. And if you've ever been to Twickenham Rugby Stadium, just behind it you'll see these massive tower blocks. That was the tower blocks I grew up in. And so every now and again there'd be a rugby game on, and the area would be filled with rich white people, and predominantly on the estate I grew up on, there was mainly black kids and mixed race kids. And so it got to a point where there was like this real alienation from the rest of the world. I was like, there's a whole group of people that have so much and we have so little, and they don't even know how hard it is for us. And that was the starting of my resentment against people who had stuff, because I judged that if I had all that stuff, I'd be happy. I'd be happier. Yeah. And that was a complete false promise in itself. But when you're a young kid and you've had nothing,
it's all you can grab onto.
That's what you think. You think, well, no wonder it's so miserable here, because look how little we have. And so you think, one day when I have the car, the house, the money, the wife, all this stuff, I'll be happy. Well, no, it wasn't.
And was that where like all the crime sort of started then? Because it was sort of like you're living in this bubble and you've got all this abuse and things like that going on, but at the time, you know, you're just a little kid, so you don't really know that it's necessarily like, I don't know, you might have intuitively knew it's not right, but you didn't know that how different your life was to the other people. And then when you got to like 12, 13, you started seeing what everybody else had, and then you were like, sort of, you know, like you guys.
Yeah,
is that where?
Yeah, it was.
Is that where the crime sort of?
It was jealousy, but it was also like this sense of hopelessness. You know, when I looked at like Richmond is about a 15-minute walk from the council estate I grew up on, and I'd walk into Richmond, which is probably one of the most wealthiest areas in Surrey, probably Greater London, and I'd look at houses and I could never ever afford to buy any of these houses, none of them. I couldn't even ever afford to buy a house in Isleworth. I couldn't afford to ever buy a car. I couldn't even afford to pay to have driving lessons, you know. And it was just this resentment of like, how is this so unfair? How have I been dealt this really shit hand in life? Like, my dad's a junkie, my mum's an alcoholic, I've been beaten, abused, and we're broke. And, you know, I couldn't help but look at families walking around Richmond with both parents and a lovely car and loads of money, and I would just think, like, how are they not even aware how hard it is for us, you know? And a little bit, it was like a resentment, but it felt like a justified resentment. It was like, I have a right to be pissed off about this, and I have a right to even the score. And that's what started my journey into crime, really, because I looked around my community, and in the absence of any male role models, the elder kids in our community became the dads. They became the father figures, and the elder kids in our community were lost kids as well. They were just 18, 20 years old, but they were selling drugs, and they had what we thought we needed. You know, they might have been a stolen car, you know, but they had a car, a decent car. They had money. They had, you know, they looked like they were having fun. They were partying, getting high. And so we knew, look, you're never going to become a barrister. You know, at the best, I think the best job someone had on my council estate was a postman. So that was like how I thought. I thought, even if I do really well, I might be a postman. But the odds are I'm probably not. You know, because I looked at my family history. I looked at all the men that went before me, and all the men on my mum's side, all gypsies in and out of prison, and all the men on my dad's side have been in and out of prison. So I was just like, the likelihood of me becoming a postman and not going to prison are really slim. And so your self-esteem, I believe, is gauged on them two things. You look around your community, no one's doing much. You look back at the men behind you, what they've done, they ain't done much. And it's like a maths equation. You think, well, how am I going to suddenly pull this out of the bag? What makes me so special? So yeah, it's a lot of dynamics to it to explain growing up in that neighbourhood, and I can say all of this looking back in hindsight, but it's a lot for a young mind to process without any support from a responsible, sober adult.
But with all that in mind, did you ever think you'd break out of that social norm? Or did you have this kind of thought in your head that you were limited to these specific things in life that you were going to do, or you would go into a specific career because someone else did?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely got to a point when I came out of prison the first time, and I applied for jobs, and doors got shut in my face, and then I went to the Army careers office, and I said to them, just give me a job in an infantry unit on the front line, where in the war zone, like just as cannon fodder. I'll take that, just so I don't have to go back to prison.
Was that almost because you had enough, or did you really want to do that?
I didn't want to do it, but I didn't want to go back to prison. You know, like, I went to prison, I just turned 16, and I went to prison, and I went to a murderer's wing, because I went to prison for attempted murder. and I went to a murderer's wing, the toughest wing in Feltham Young Offenders, where most of the kids were, 18 to 20, and I was just turned 16. I was a skinny white kid, and I stood out like a sore thumb. So I was fighting all the time. I had to fight to survive. So when I got out, I didn't want to go back, but I couldn't get a job. And so I thought, my only other alternative, and it's crazy because at that time I thought I would definitely get in the army. I thought, if worse comes to worse, I'll just go and sign up for the army and just stick me in an infantry unit on the front, like a disposable force. Just send in the convicts, like someone like that. And because I had a conviction for armed robbery and possession of firearms, I got convicted of that when I was 15. The careers officer just like laughed me out of the careers office. He was like, mate, you got a conviction for possession of firearms. We're not going to give you a loaded gun and send you out there. And I was just like, I walked out of the careers office. I think it was in central London. I think it was Victoria. I think it might even still be there to this day. And I was just like, well, what am I going to do then? I can't get a job, and I can't even get in the army. Like, what am I going to do? And you go back to my community, and everyone is committing crime, and it's really hard to say no. Especially when, like, my dad was a heroin addict, he was gone, and my mum was just an alcoholic. There was no one there to say, come on, mate, don't give up. We can do this. It was just like, left to your own devices. And, and that's how I ended up back in and out again, another 2 times. Because I think when a situation is hopeless, and that's what my situation felt like when I got turned down from the army, anything goes really after that. And that's how I felt. When I got rejected from the army, I was like, anything goes now. I've tried, and doors have been shut in my face, so don't blame me if I wreak havoc now out in the world, because I'm going to get mine the way that I can.
Yeah. So that sense of, that combination of rejection and misguidance and all that, is that what made you turn to the gangs and drugs and alcohol then?
Yeah, 100%.
So you felt like just give up because you thought you weren't going to go anywhere because they shut doors on you?
Yeah, basically. And I think the other bit of this, which I think is often like forgotten about, is like the sense of belonging. Like when you've grown up in a home where your mum is drunk all the time and your dad's not around, you and people are allowed into the house who hurt you, physically abuse you and sexually abuse you, you don't feel. I didn't feel like I belonged to this family. I felt like I just live in this home where the people who we call family hurt me. And so, but I think deep within all of us as human beings, we have a need for fellowship, to feel like we belong to something. I think that's something that's quite built in us. And so when you like go out in your community and there's gangs of kids, like that was my family. It was like my pack, and it was like that sense of belonging, sense of just like feeling safe. Like I've got people around me who would die for me, who would die to protect me. That became like my family and my safe haven, really.
And that's exactly what you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
You pretty much put yourself on the line for your friend for your first time that you went into prison, didn't you? If you want to talk about that a bit more.
Yeah. So the first time I went to prison, to give you a bit more context on that, so I got convicted of armed robbery, possession of firearms when I was 15, which back then was a big deal. There wasn't many 15-year-old armed robbers in London back then. And I just got off of that. I just managed to just not go to prison for that, although I spent a lot of time in the police station and the courts. And the social workers and my solicitor was just like, what are we going to gain by locking this kid up? I'd had medical reports, hospital reports to show that I'd been hospitalised on numerous occasions, to say like, look at this kid's life. What are you going to gain? You're going to lock him up now for 23 hours a day. And so the judge basically said, okay, we're not going to lock you up, but we're going to give you all of this other stuff, community service and all of that. And then anyway, like 2 weeks after that, it was a rugby game at Twickenham, which was always a problem for us, because we would stand around on these street corners selling drugs and hustling, and suddenly these streets are now filled with rich white people. That's how we viewed them in our eyes, people who had a normal life. And the thing for us is that they would walk the streets like they own the streets, drunk, throwing their beer cans around, shouting abuse. And so whenever rugby game was on, we'd always end up having a fight with rugby fans, even though we were kids. You know, we were like young kids fighting grown men. And one of them basically racially abused my mate, a drunk rugby fan, and a fight broke out, and my mate basically stabbed this rugby fan in the neck and the face about 30 times, just repeatedly stabbed him in the face. And police pulled us all in. They arrested every single one of us. And, you know, we were all young. We were all like 15, 16-year-old kids. And they basically held me and my mate, because I had the firearms charge and my mate was about 2 years older and he had previous. And they said, right, we want to know who done it. There's no witnesses, there's no camera evidence. And, you know, if you don't tell us who, out of you two, who done it, then you're both going to prison. And, you know, the code of the street where I grew up, when that is like your family, that's your blood, you just don't grasp. So I just said, no comment. I went no comment the whole interview. And then I ended up going to prison for my mate, onto the murderer's wing, age 16. And I'd done about, done about 7 or 8 months on remand, just every day, 23 hours a day in a tiny cell, 4-foot wide cell, every day for 23 hours. And, you know, slowly it sends you crazy. You know, like I just went mad. I became like, you imagine if you locked a dog in a cage for 23 hours and then you let that dog out into a room full of other angry dogs. And that's what it was like. The cell, the doors would open, we'd come out, there'd be a fight. Who's going on the pool table first? Who's playing table football first? And that was it. You know, fighting in the showers, that was it. You know, and for me, I think it was a little bit tougher because the first thing was there wasn't many white kids in prison back then. And there wasn't many 16-year-old white kids back then, not on the murderer's wing. So, you know, the black guys would stick together, you know, and you'd have guys from other different postcodes would stick together. I think there was one other white kid on the wing and he just got bullied and robbed for his stuff every day. And so I was like on my own trying to survive. And it was savage. It's completely inhumane, the rehabilitation system that's still in place now. You know, 23 hours a day, locking people up, hoping that when they get released, they'll suddenly fall in line with society. It's just completely unrealistic.
How do you think that they could change that rehabilitation to make sure that when they're out, they don't reoffend? Like, how could they change that? Yeah, so this was a big thing for me when I set up the CIP project, which is a project which is similar to the workshop I delivered here with you guys, but I do it as an intensive course, and I delivered one in Swaleside Prison a couple of weeks ago, and it's about educating them on emotional intelligence, like why are you angry, like really getting to the core of why are you angry. And if you can help them process that anger in a healthy way, they're less likely to take it out on another inmate or a prison officer or a member of the public. So giving them that support whilst they're inside, so when they're released, they're in a good position, and then giving them support when they're released as well. So the CIP project gives them all of that. So I've got a list of employers that can give these inmates, that we're willing to give these inmates a job. I've also got a group of guys who I take in there with me who are ex-prison inmates who turn their life around. And so it's like it covers all bases. It's like while you're locked up, we're going to educate you on emotional intelligence. If you complete all of that stuff, then we'll support you when you get out. You get a mentor, and then we'll also connect you with potential employers. So,
I think that's brilliant that you're doing
Yeah,
that.
that's amazing.
If you had that the first time you went into prison, do you reckon that would have been the one bit of
100%.
leverage, you wouldn't have.
100%, mate. Yeah, that's all I needed. I think the problem is that, you know, and no disrespect to anyone who's gone to university and got loads of qualifications and they want to work in the prison sector, right? No disrespect to you, full respect to you actually for trying, but I just didn't trust anyone like that. If you were sitting in front of me and, you know, you had a really lovely family and you'd been to uni and you're trying to talk to me about changing my life, I was like, you don't get it. You don't get what it's like.
Different backgrounds.
Yeah. And I think it's really simple. Like, if you think about it this way, if you wanted to be a professional football player, you know, you'd probably seek out the advice of maybe an ex-football player and say, how did you do it? How did you get there? And like in the prison system, you've got people who are in charge of rehabilitating inmates who've never been to prison, who've never rehabilitated themselves.
Got to be that lived experience. Is kind of what you're saying, isn't it? You've got to have that lived experience to be able to pass that message back on. Sort of thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research now that's gone into this, how lived experience is actually more valuable than a qualification from university in terms of working within the prison system, because it's all about building trust. And I think as soon as the trust is gone, if someone doesn't trust you, that's it. You may as well just leave it. They're never going to open up. You know, like you guys know, right? The trust we built in what we done. Yeah. We opened up because we trusted other people in the room. If you don't trust the person if you didn't trust me or the person who's facilitating that, you're not going to open up. I think that's a problem that we have at the moment is the prisons haven't really figured that out yet. That, so we want to rehabilitate that guy? Well, let's get someone who's never been to prison, who's never rehabilitated themselves to help him. It's like, no. No, you need to get someone who's been to prison, who's rehabilitated themselves, and get them to talk to him. Yeah. And it's like, for me, I see it so simple in my mind, but I think the Ministry of Justice is still wrapping their head around it. And I think we're getting to a breaking point with it, where prisons are packed and, stabbing, knife crime, murders, it's all going up. And I think... it's going to get... I feel like we're at a point now, it could be a beautiful storm brewing for some real positive change to happen. So, we'll see. Hopefully some doors open and some positive change can happen, I stay hopeful. I hope that change... And you just got to do your part. I think a lot of the time I moaned about this problem for a long time. And I remember one of my mentors said to me, well, why don't you do something about it? You've got a lot to say on this bloody subject. Why don't you do something about it? There's a lot you can do. And I had a lot of excuses of why I couldn't do this stuff. Like, you've got to be approved. You need this insurance, that insurance. You've got to go through the government portals. You've got to... And it was like, yeah, but you can do that. It might be a long, lengthy process, but you can do it. And so that's what I done. I went through this whole process of being on the government website, getting registered, registering a company, having insurance. It's like a load of hoops you got to jump through, but if you care about it enough, then do it, and don't do it to get paid. Just do it to make a difference in the world.
Going on to the topic, in your book, so you because I read the book and you go through so many different. You experienced a lot of setbacks, and you made lots of quite bad mistakes that really, made an impact in your life. And I know that a lot of people in life, we all experience mistakes, and I think a lot of people find it hard to, people respond to the mistakes in kind of bad ways. And when you were like an alcoholic, I noticed that when you made a mistake, you'd binge drink, and that's how you kind of coped. And I think a lot of people, when they mess up, they beat themselves up and they tell themselves they don't speak to themselves kindly. What advice could you give to people so that they can leave room for growth, and that when a mistake happens or a setback, they can actually be like, no, this is going to make me stronger? Because you're a prime example of that, because your whole life has been constant setbacks. I was just wondering if you had any advice.
I mean, I think we should remove the word mistake from the dictionary and just replace it with lesson. Just get rid of it. It's a pointless word. I made a mistake, or I got it. It's like, no, you're just learning how to get it right. That's all you're doing. And I think a lot of people are similar to me. Like, I'm a bit of a knucklehead. I have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
I have to learn through pain. And I could have a room full of people who I trust telling me, don't do it, this is going to hurt. But I would have to go and experience the pain myself. It's like, no, I just need to check. I think I can crack this. I think I can crack this. And then I'm like, oh, no, I can't. No, you're right. Yeah. And I think in the middle of that, I would, like what you said in the book, I would hammer myself. I'd really hammer myself. My mind would say things to me that I wouldn't say to my worst enemy. It'd be like, you're shit. You're just like your dad. You're a waste of space. You're destined to spend the rest of your life in prison. Just give up. Just give up. You're never going to make it. You're a joke. You're a laughing stock. That's the sort of battle I would go through. And the only way to stop it was alcohol. I'd drink alcohol, take drugs, and I'd be like, it would just stop the washing machine of all them negative voices. You know, the sad thing about it was when I would sober up, then voices would come back. You know,
it's a lot worse probably then.
Yeah, after some of the stuff that went on, obviously, in the book.
Because then you'd wake up and you'd be like, God, what did I do last night? I've done this, I've done that, and then voices would come back. And so what I had to learn was, and I think my advice for anyone going through any of that stuff is, especially young students as well, is like, you've got time. You've got so much time. You think, like, I only got sober when I was 25. 25 years old, I got sober and started to turn my life around. At 25, I'd never had a job longer than a month, and I had no GCSEs, no qualifications, nothing. Yet by the age of 35, I'd set up such a successful business, I was in a position where I could retire. I could just not work if I didn't want to. And that is just like all I'm trying to say to you is you've got enough time, even if you're in your early 20s and you've messed it all up, just don't worry. Like, just start again. Like, if I can do it with no qualifications and an alcoholic mum and a heroin addict dad, so I know nothing, then anyone can. And I think just don't put too much pressure on yourself, because the real goal, in my opinion, should be happiness.
Definitely.
The goal shouldn't be money or a job title or the house. It should be happy. How happy am I?
Happiness is inside. It's not the exterior.
No, it's not. It's not. And I tell you what, I chased that illusion. You know, growing up in the neighbourhood where we had nothing, I was convinced when I have that car like them rich people have and the house, then I'm going to be happy. And then I get the house and all of that, and I'm not happy. Yeah. I'm still left with this thing inside of me, like something's missing. And where I found peace is doing things that make me happy. Do you think it took me, 30 plus years to figure that out? So you want to feel happy? You have to do things that make you feel happy. Okay, so what makes you feel happy?
Who knows? Yeah,
I don't know. Chocolate hobnobs. Chocolate hobnobs. They make me happy. But then it was like I had to go through this process in my sort of early to mid 30s of like, what makes Michael happy? And I don't mean instant happiness like a chocolate hobnob would. I mean like
that long term.
So how do you feel about does running? I remember one of my mentors at the time said, does running make you happy? I was like, oh, running. I bloody hate running. I hate it. And he's like, but how do you feel afterwards when you get back? And I'm like, well, when I get back, I feel pretty good. I'm like, yeah, you've done it. You've achieved something. And he's like, well, that makes you happy then. And I'm like, so then I had to change my understanding of happiness. Sometimes the things that make you happy don't make you happy straight away. Sometimes they make you feel like, God, I really don't want to do this. But I have to almost be like dangle a carrot like a donkey and follow the happiness. I know at the end I'll feel happy.
It's almost like short-term pain and then long-term happiness, as opposed to short-term pleasure, like taking drugs, for example, and then long-term unhappiness,
Mate,
it's like flip the script, sort of.
100%. That's 100%. And I think this is the problem we have in society today at the moment, is that everything is at the touch of our fingertips. Everything's so easy. Like Amazon, you can go, someone can say, you read this book? This book will make me happy. You can go, boom, prime, boom, next day it's there.
And
I think that's the problem, is that everything's so easy, we're convinced that, you know, happiness is something we can buy.
We almost forget, don't we?
Yeah, 100%. We've just lost our way with it all, you know, I think, you know, and happiness, it comes in all forms for me, you know, and it's all free stuff. It's like just going out for a walk, it's free. Doing breath work, free. Meditating, free. Running on the road, free. It's like...
But linking back to all of that, like you're saying, we've all got everything in our hands. We can do anything we want right now. And it's almost as if it's placed us into this bubble of comfort.
Yeah.
So you've got to just take that step outside the comfort zone. Like you're saying, you hate running. But after that run, you come back, you take a cold shower, you feel amazing because you just did 5-10K. So that's fine, isn't it?
And
but that's what it is.
Because
like,
I think a lot of people's issue, maybe, is they kind of go around in cycles, like they do one thing, but then they end up like not happy. And I think their mindset, they kind of expect to be given happiness. They expect the world to give them this and that. And I think they don't realise that actually if you want to be happy, you've got to work for it, and it takes time. Like it takes a lot of time. And you know, it's hard. And I think, like for me, for example, I actively seek happiness. If I didn't actively seek it, I don't think I wouldn't be a naturally happy person. And I think that maybe a lot of people need to kind of change their mindset a bit. And don't know, how do you think people could do that? Because it's such an important thing that I think people need to become aware of.
100%. And I think happiness should be something that you're aiming for, but everything in balance. I believe life is all about balance. Like it's unrealistic to want to be happy all the time. It's unrealistic. As human beings, a full human being is someone who's able to feel a full range of emotions. Like, so I'm not just narrowing down my emotions that I can feel, just happiness. Because if you just feel happiness, if that's all you feel, it's going to become pretty boring.
It's unauthentic.
And there's something,
it's going to be, and that's how people, I believe, it leads to depression.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we, as human beings, we need to allow ourselves. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel sad, and especially for men, I think that's why the suicide rate is so high amongst men. Is allow yourself as a man to cry. Really, can you allow yourself to feel sadness and grief as a man? You know, and not have it all figured out, and not be happy all the time. You know, and I think we're sort of slowly coming around to it. I mean, you saw Danny Cipriani's thing on social media. That's a great example of that grief that he'd been holding for so long, and then Caroline dies, and boom, it comes out. And I think, imagine if he just lifted the lid off that once a week with someone he trusted. Maybe it wouldn't be so intense. And I think so happiness should be the goal, but then it also has to be realistic. It's like, I'm not going to be happy all the time.
No.
It's just completely unrealistic. You know, like, I think a lot of people we want to be happy all the time, and I think it's nice, but I think it's also unrealistic. And I think if we can, what I do is prepare my children for that. You know, my two daughters, is let them see when I'm sad. You know, let them see my tears as well. You know, remember when my dad died in July, and I let them see my tears, and let them be with me in my sadness, and not try. No, go away now, go away. Daddy's upset. It was like, no, you come and witness of what it looks like for a man to be vulnerable, and for a man to cry, and for a man to grieve the death of his father.
That's really important, I think, definitely for your children to see that. And I don't think a lot of people might not see that from their parents, and you know, share that emotional connection. And I think that some people find that quite hard then to open up, because they've never been taught to open up.
That's right.
You know, and I think that what you're doing, like with the group that we did, if that was to happen more often, it's just people just learning to open up. Like it's just as simple as
stuff, isn't it? It's simple stuff,
but it's so impactful. Like it's so it really can really change your life, and really change the way you view, you know, the world.
100%. I mean, you see, like, part of I do this in prisons as well. So back when we were in tribes all around the world, the theme in all of them is that you would sit in a circle. That was the theme. And the reason for that is that everyone's voice is equal. So no one's voice is higher than another. And then we got all civilised and we had a board table and we stuck the leader at the top. And the people whose voices weren't that important, we stuck them right down the bottom. So the leader couldn't really hear you. And I think just the fact that all of the workshops I do, I when I went into Swaleside last week, I said to the prison guards, I want all these tables out. There was a board table and one seat at the top for me. I was like, no, get rid of, I want all these tables gone. And all the inmates all got rid of all the tables and we made a circle. And I was like, we're all equal here. And all of our voices are important as everyone else's. And you make sure you can see every man and woman's face, you know. And it's just that, just the power of that, of sitting in a circle of other human beings where everyone has an equal voice.
Yeah.
Like,
That is it, though, isn't it? No matter what they've done, what they've achieved to be in jail, you have that interconnectedness with everyone through that emotional intelligence. You just the whole point of the fellowship, like you said, is just the understanding one another, where it's one on one or one with 50 others. So what you're saying is just that connection and making sure that no matter what they've been through and being there for that person or people, that can do a great load in their life.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so simple, and it's like we can do that ourselves. All of you guys, you know, like it's like we all have the power to do that in our homes and with our friends. You know, granted, it's a bit more tricky when you're young because most social circles are involved when it's a party and alcohol's involved. And as soon as you throw alcohol into the mix, you can't have a vulnerable, honest conversation. And it's pointless anyway because the person will probably forget it the next day anyway. You know. So, but we can, and this is what we've done, and I hope that we continue to do with Richard Irish College, is create them sacred spaces, which is just a circle of humans talking from the heart, not from here. Like, and that's why the exercises we do, it's like, take a breath. What would your heart say now? What would your heart choose to say? And 9 times out of 10 for me, even when I said it then, when I just thinking about it now, it's sadness. You know, I still sit on some sadness and some grief that I, you know, don't always have the space to express. And it's important that every now and again I give myself that, you know, that honesty and just checking out with me, like, really, where am I at? Where am I really at now?
Got the confidence that you know what you've been through and you know what you've got left. And you're just happy with what has happened, and you're not really struggling as a past, you're living in the forward. And then, Michael, when was the first time that you really thought, oh, I do have an equal voice around my circle? So was it in the gang after prison when you got your first establishment with your estate agent business? When did you think, I am an equal in the circle? Yeah,
well, it's funny because there's been different moments throughout my life where you outgrow people, you know? And it was like, I remember when I set up my business and I'd gone from being part of this gang to now being sober and being a business owner and wearing a suit every day. And in my mind, I thought, this is going to earn me a big seat at this table because now I'm an employer. I've made it. But in fact, the difference was so much for a lot of my old gang that they had to tear me down. Emotionally, mentally. He's changed. He's got his head up his arse. Who does that guy think he is anyway? We should rob his bloody business, you know.
And imagine them being your trusted friends at the start.
And they were meant to be the people that I was willing to die for or go to prison for. You see, when someone steps up and lets their light shine, you either applaud them, which a true friend should do, or if it makes you feel a bit insecure because you're not letting your own light shine, it's just easier to tear them down. It's just easy to go, stop, turn your light down. You're making me look bad over here. And if you don't turn it, I'm going to tear you down off that pedestal. And that's what they were doing. And so, just at the moment when I thought my voice is going to be heard and equal here, it wasn't.
So that was horrible.
And it was horrible, you know, because I was like...
Before you grow together.
27, 28, and I had to like leave every friend behind and go on my own. And it was like, I had no friends. And then this voice come in, well, what's the point? What's the point in staying sober? You're a loner. You've got no mates anymore. And it was hard coming around to that in accepting, okay, one door's closed, but it's going to give me room to invest time into new relationships. And that's what I'd done. I looked around for people who was on the same path as me, who were doing the similar things, and who I felt like I could trust. I could trust these people, and so slowly, and life changes again. Like I had this group of friends, and we got sober, and we'd been friends for a long time, and then you go on SAS Who Dares Wins, and a book comes out about your life, and you're on telly, you're on radio, and now they're the ones gossiping. Well, he's really changed, because a lot of them have got the problems, the same problems that we had when we was like 1-2 years sober. They've still got the same problems, but now I've fixed all of them, and I'm in a different place altogether. And so the same thing happens again. We'll tear him down. He's changed, and so. The biggest thing for me is learning to love myself enough to protect my peace of mind. So like I believe my peace of mind is my responsibility to protect. Like no one else gives a shit. Their lives are too busy. They're trying to protect their own peace of mind. Some people aren't even aware of it. And for me, I'm just really careful in who I spend too much time with, because for me, anger is infectious. I spent a lifetime growing up around angry men. And if I'm around someone who's angry a lot of the time, you best believe he's going to start robbing off of me in some way. And it could just be some poor guy in road rage who puts his middle finger up to me, and I'm out of the car trying to fight him because I've been rubbing shoulders with loads of angry men, and that behaviour is normal.
Yeah, if it's not empowering you positively, then
so whatever circle you're in, you're going to pick up like
you do.
You went into you were in Feltham, around criminals, and what do you become? You become a criminal, and now you're around, mentors and people on SAS, and you're just growing and growing and growing, and doing great things. Yeah. So it's kind of like what you're saying is whoever you surround yourself by, it's going to rub off on you.
100%, mate. 100%. If you want to see how successful someone's going to be, just look at the 5 people closest to them. It's really easy to figure it out. And if you're surrounding, no matter how talented or gifted you are, if your crowd are all pulling you in the opposite direction, you're never going to make it. It's too difficult now. There's so much competition out there with social media and young entrepreneurs. If you're really not surrounding yourself with the right people, it's just too hard.
Yeah.
That must have required a lot of strength for you to leave all of, because you were surrounded, that was your life, and that must take a lot of strength to, break away from that. And I think that probably was quite a big factor in your change. And I think a lot of people our age do find themselves in the wrong friend groups, and it's really hard. And I think people aren't some people aren't strong enough to say, actually, no, this isn't good for me. I'd know if they're in a friend group with lots of drugs and they can't get away from that, or if their friends that aren't making them feel good. Do you have any advice on people who actually find themselves in the wrong friend group and actually wanting to get out and change and become a better person?
Yeah, so my advice would be, instead of having a big dramatic exit, just slowly detach with love. So that's what I've done, is just slowly detach with love. It's not like middle finger to you, I never want to see you again, I never want to talk to you again. It's like, I wish you well on your journey. I'm saying this mentally, I'm not saying this to the person, but I wish this person well on their journey, and I hope they have all the success, but I'm just choosing to go down a slightly different path. And if at some point that person has a conversation with you to say, Charlotte, we never see you anymore, where you been? Then you can have that conversation with them, and it's up to you how honest you want to be about the truth. But for me, I just use the words like, I've chosen to just spend more time doing this and spend more time doing that, and but it doesn't mean that we're not friends. If I see you, I say hello to you, but we just might not talk as often as we used to.
Also justifies another thing that they didn't realise kind of that you did go by saying, oh, where have you been, kind of thing. So that kind of hints and shows that what you've done is a very powerful and good thing.
Yeah.
That if you are in that bad environment and you know it and you've detached from it, then you've done something good.
Yeah, 100%. There's a real easy way to tell if a friend is a true friend. Now is a good example. So any one of your friends now, you're filming the first episode of this podcast, which I believe is a massive thing. I don't think there's any other student podcast in the UK. Probably
it's insane.
One of the first things.
Cool.
It's probably going to, BBC have already said they want to upload this and cover this story. So it's massive. If you have any friends in your circles who are not clapping for you right now, who are not cheering you on, they're not a true friend. It's the most easiest way.
Wow, yeah.
Pressure's on you now.
They'll be watching
Turn the heat up,
now.
mate. Yeah.
A true friend should be going, you lot are smashing it.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's what a true friend should do. If you've got friends that are sort of gossiping, judging, sneaky comments here and there, they're not really true friends. And then it's up to you. Like, I believe people show us who they are. People who are good at talking, oh, I'm this and I'm that. But I believe people show you who they are.
Definitely.
So look at what they're showing you, not what they're telling you. What are you showing me?
Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
classic
Yeah.
saying.
So people will show you who they are,
Yeah.
and it's up to you whether you pay attention to it or not. And I think for me, for many years of my life, I ignored a lot of stuff because it was easier.
Yeah.
It was easy to just go, I don't really agree with that behaviour anymore. Them selling drugs and then beating that guy up and him cheating on his bird. But what can I do? I'm in this. These are the guys I've grown up with.
But what made you realise that? What made you realise you can do better than you were doing?
It was the pain of them judging me and trying to tear me down. That's what forced me to step away. And then when it happened the second time with all my friends that I got sober with, I remember it was a conversation where I had an old friend who used to get angry a lot, and we'd have conversations, and he'd call up and go, "Oh, I'm so angry. This guy is insane." He'd have problems with staff and stuff, and he'd say, "This guy, I'm gonna." And my thing was always over the years, just to, okay, mate, look, have you tried this? Or you tried? No, I'm not. And so you think we'd done that. We played that role back and forth over 6-7 years of our friendship of being sober. And every time I'd get off the phone call, I'd go back to trying to have fun with my family, and I just wouldn't feel the same. I'd feel a little bit like
Dragged you down.
I've been infected with an angry virus or something. I'm just haven't got that same. And then it was like, how much do you love yourself to say, I'm not okay with that?
Yeah.
And stand in your ground and say, look, I'm happy to support you as a mate in finding a solution to this stuff, but I don't want to be a dumping ground for your anger. Your garden is a mess, and you want to come into my garden and take a shit. And it's like, no, go back to your garden, take your shit with you. When you clean up your own mess, you're allowed in my garden. Don't bring your mess into my garden. And it's like,
Don't let him back into your garden.
it's just like, look, I'm happy to help. I'll help you find a solution. But if you're rocking up at my doorstep with unprocessed anger that you just want me to listen to, for me, it's not okay. Because I grew up around angry men, and it's like, at what point do you say, I'm not okay with this anymore?
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to men screaming down the phone at me, even though it's not directed at me.
And I think that kind of all starts with self-love.
Self-love, yeah.
Because, lots of people, it's easy to see your external situation and blame others. Like, so you can, they were angry, now they're making me angry. But it's very easy to look at your external situation. But I think what's really important is actually, well, if you loved yourself, would you let them treat you like this? Would you be with these people? Would you do the things you're doing? And I think that people really underestimate just the idea of telling yourself that you love yourself. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was this question. It said, if you really loved yourself, what would you do? So now I find myself, even if it's as simple as I'll go to the kitchen and I'll get, I'll look at the biscuits or a banana, and I'll be like, if I loved myself, what would I do? It's just as simple as that, but it really gets you thinking, because it gets you thinking, what are you putting into your body? And I just think, the self-love, that whole concept, I mean, we could talk for hours on that.
It's all energy, isn't it?
Yeah, it all just starts,
If you have 40%, let's say it's all like a battery charge. If you have 40% of self-love in your body and the rest is other emotions, anger, sadness, the 40%, who are you distributing that energy to? Are you keeping 20% for yourself and 10% to your mum, your family and friends? Or do you want to have that 100% and keep 50% for your health and give it to other people? Exactly. It's all about that energy. It's all transferred.
One way of putting it
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that because I agree with everything you guys are saying, but my experience of that is that I would often... So I grew up in a home where neither parent showed themselves any self-love. You know, my mum drank herself into oblivion every night of the week, you know, with cider. My dad stuck needles in his arm until he eventually died of a heroin overdose last year. You know, so often if you've grown up in homes where your primary caregivers haven't modelled what self-love looks like, it might be a bit of a stretch for people. And I think sometimes it just needs to be modelled more. You know, like similar to the stuff we do on our workshops, is just, okay, let's just check in with each other. Let's do a bit of meditation. You know, like, it's like everyone's got what self-love is for them. And I know what works for me might not work for Halim. What works for you might not, you know. It's like, you just got to play around with it. This is the beauty of life is, let's play around with some stuff and see what makes me happy. You know, like.
And as well, like, when you're talking about self-love, I know you talk about, like, the way you act with your kids and stuff, but when you're practicing self-love, that then has an indirect effect on everyone else around you. That has an effect on your kids. Like, when you're putting yourself first, people sometimes think like it's selfish to put yourself first. But in reality, like, when you're putting yourself first, you're helping everyone else around you. You know what I mean? And like 100 times more than you could by just wearing yourself out, trying to help everyone, do this and that.
You can't help people until you've helped yourself.
The tricky thing with self-love, and this is where a lot of people become prisoners to self-love, is like, I've got to show myself love, so I have to meditate today. I have to do at least 10 minutes meditation, this amount of exercise, this amount of that.
Oh, mate, I'm a culprit of this one, mate. And if I don't do it,
then I'm bad. So now you're the prison guard of self-love. You're locking yourself up. Are you allowed out? You done all your good stuff? No, you're not. That lock you up.
That is very
true. So you become a prisoner of your self-love, and it's like, can I allow myself to just be human and not get it right every day?
Step back and allow it.
You know, in Native American tradition, they had a thing called the Good Red Road. I talked to him about this. And so I spent a lot of time with Native Americans, real Native Americans, because I was fascinated by their culture. They knew so much, and we just completely obliterated these people. Anyway, one of their things was, amongst the men and the women, was this thing called the Good Red Road. And the Good Red Road is essentially self-love. Is that if you're on the Good Red Road, which is if you're trying to be a better version of yourself each day through various things, then you have to cut yourself some slack. That's part of the rules of being on the Good Red Road. You're on the Good Red Road, so you're trying, and you're going to slip up and you're going to make mistakes, but you're on the Good Red Road. And if you're on the Good Red Road, you have to be compassionate with yourself. And I remember that was one of my questions to one of the elders. I was like, I don't get it, because I know if I do this and this, I'll be really happy, but then sometimes I just don't do it, and then I don't do it for like a week, and I don't get it, and then I feel shit, and then I have to do it again. And he was like, just be gentle with yourself, brother. You're on the Good Red Road. And I was like, what? And then he told me this whole story. If you're on the Good Red Road, to be gentle with yourself, that, you know, as long as you're on that road of trying to be a better version of yourself, that's all that matters, really. You know, you're never going to get it perfect. Some days you might be really happy, but also if you're a human being with a full range of emotions and allow yourself to feel all them emotions, some days you might be on the Good Red Road, but you might feel sad as well. And that's okay. That's part of life and part of being human. And I remember when I discovered that, it like completely blew my mind. And he gave me a technique. He said, instead of thinking, I have to do this stuff, why don't you say, I choose to do this stuff? And I was like, can you say more about that? And he was like, so why do you do this stuff? Because it makes me happy. So, okay, so instead of saying, I have to do this stuff to make me feel happy, say, I like to be happy, so I choose to do these things every day. And it was like simple switching up the language. I was like, okay, I like to be happy, so I choose to do these things every day, so I can be happy. Just change the language instead of me saying, oh, I've got to meditate. Oh, if I don't meditate, I know what my days. It was like, no, I like to be happy, so I just choose to do it.
I like to go back a little bit.
Sure.
This is amazing talking about like where you are now, but like there's so much stuff in the past and how you actually got to that good red road. That I'd love to talk to you about. So obviously you're talking about like the crime and everything like that. But I'd like to know like what impact did drugs actually have, like drugs and alcohol? Because in the book it says like you tried heroin when you were crack when you were like 12. Smoking loads of weed, alcohol. Like it's crazy to think about, isn't it? But like you just talk me through all of that, mate. Like,
so the community we grew up in, our father figures were the older kids, and the older kids were hustling, and the main way of making money was selling drugs. So there was always drugs around. There was always crack, there was always heroin. That was one thing we genuinely had in abundance. We didn't have a lot of money, but there was always drugs to go around. And, that was one of the good things about sort of living where we lived, because you lived next to Twickenham and Richmond, and anyone who was selling drugs there were just people that our elder kids would go and rob, because, you'd have a lot of people in the areas who thought they were tough drug dealers until someone who's really had a rock bottom background comes and rocks up and takes all your stuff off you. So there was always an abundance of drugs. And, I remember when I said to people for the first time about doing crack and heroin when I was like 12, 13, and they were really shocked, but it was just the normal thing, like on our estate. Everyone was doing it. Like, it wasn't like, whoa, you've tried it. It was just like, just passing it around. And heroin was one of them drugs that was just like, I remember the first time I properly took it. I'd smoked it in a spliff a couple of times, but when I had properly took it, it was this feeling of like, if I'm dying now, I don't care. Wow. This feels so good. I really don't care. If this is me, I'm on my way out, I don't care, because it feels so good. And you imagine all the pain of years and years of neglect and violence, and it's just gone. And you're just in this happy place. It was really hard not to become addicted to that happy place when you come back to reality and there's just pain everywhere. And so that was my experience of drugs, and heavy drugs.
So you started drugs when you were like 12, 13?
Yeah, like 12,
started
13,
smoking weed and stuff. And then when did it, so you start smoking drugs when you're like 12, 13, you're just a kid, just messing around really. And how did you go from that to literally becoming like a full-on junkie really, wasn't it, when you went to prison? Yeah,
so I come out of prison the second time. And when I come out of prison the second time, I didn't even try and get a job. I was just like, what's the point? I know I can't, I've tried. I tried the first time, and now I've got a whole load more offences, so I'm never going to get a job now. So I literally just went back to my community, and I was like, right, what crimes are we committing? I thought I'll just jump back on doing armed robberies again. And it was like the sort of late 90s, there was a crack epidemic, everyone was doing crack now, even the rich people were smoking crack. And all my mates were earning loads of money, so I was like, I'm going to sell crack and heroin. And I was just the worst drug dealer ever, because I'm an addict and I just used to take all the drugs myself. And people would call me up, have you got some stuff? No, I'd look and
taken it.
I'm not giving you any. No, I ain't got any. And then I'd be all out and I'd have to go and rob other dealers or someone else to pay the money back. And then eventually I got arrested again and they just sent me straight back to prison the final time. So when I went back to prison the final time, I was a fully blown heroin addict. And they gave me 2 choices for detox when I went to Feltham Young Offenders, and they've got rid of these choices now. But one choice was a 2-week detox or a 7-day detox, and the 7-day detox is like a completely unnatural process that is banned now because it's inhumane. It basically, they put something into your system that just sucks all the drugs out, and I got like, I'd say about 24 hours, 48 hours into it. I can't remember exactly. And I was in a single cell, tiny cell, and boiling hot 1 minute, freezing cold the next minute. Hallucinations of like thinking I've seen a spider or an insect, thinking I've seen it, and then thinking it's buried in between my knuckle and gone under my hand, and then
scratching away,
and then
yeah,
and then going and then hallucinate and then coming to and noticing blood up your arms where you've been scratching, and it was just like hell on earth. Yeah. That's the only way I can explain it. If you could think of hell while you're alive, that was what it was like. And yeah, I just made a decision then. There's no way I can survive another 7 days of this. And on the first time I went to prison, a guy called Jeremy committed suicide, and I remembered how I was quite baffled. How can you hang yourself in a prison cell? Anyway, he did. He hung himself, and
so maybe Michael, just add a bit of context for the listeners. So
yeah,
Jeremy wasn't the normal convict in there. He had a different background to the rest of you.
He did, yeah. So that's a good point actually, Kez, because on my first prison sentence, there was a guy called Jeremy who was in there, well-educated kid, came from a very nice family, got into a street fight, punched the guy once and killed him. Just a drunken street fight. And he was a white kid, well-educated, come from a good family, and he just did not fit in Feltham Young Offenders. You could just tell when he came, it was like, this kid is not going to last in here. And yeah, and the bullies just slowly chipped away at him, you know, and he just lost weight over the course of 3 months. They'd rob his food off him so he wouldn't eat.
Yeah.
And he was too scared to tell the prison guards. And I remember there was a moment I could see where I really wanted to help him, but because I was the only other white kid on the wing, I was like, if I associate myself with him,
it's a weakness.
It's a weakness, but also I might have to protect this kid. If it kicks off, then I might have to protect him. If I get too emotionally attached to this guy, I'm not going to want to see someone beating him up. So I kept my distance from him, and then yeah, one morning we come out for breakfast, and the governor's, back in your cells, everyone back in your cells. And yeah, he wrapped his bed sheets up and hung himself. You know, he was due to do about 15 years for murder. And he got about 6 months into it, and he killed himself. So yeah, that was sad. It was heartbreaking, you know. And you just become immune to it, you know.
Yeah.
They took his body out of a stretcher, and when we were let out that same day, the bullies were at it again, just bullying someone else. They just found a new victim. That's how ruthless it is, prison. And I think if that's one thing I can communicate to anyone who's mucking about with county lines, any of this stuff, you might think you're a gangster. Wait till you get to prison, and let's see how tough you are, because, you know, you meet real people who've had a really difficult start in life that, you know, are quite happy to just spend the rest of their life in prison. You know, like, there was people who I knew who were doing 20 years that had given up. They were like, I'm just going to kill. Oh, I don't mind if I kill another 2-3 people. They were assigned, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. And, you know, when you meet people like that, it's, you realise I'm in a different league now, you know.
You're not the tough guy anymore.
You're not this tough guy you think you are. And I thought I was tough, but even then you meet people there who are just willing to die for their pride.
Was that the first kind of moment that you realised you should take a step back and look at yourself?
Do you know what? It was one of them moments where that was one of the contributing factors that made me, when I left prison the first time, that I don't want to go back. I was like, definitely don't want to go back to that. But it's hard. It was hard leaving and then trying to change, and and obviously I had the whole stuff, and then went back again, and the third time it was going back as a heroin addict, and that's who popped into my head as I'm laying in the bed hallucinating. I thought of Jeremy. I thought, there's a way out here. I can't escape from these prison cell, but I can escape in my mind. I can kill myself. And that was my thing. I wrapped the bed sheet up, and I was convinced, you're never going to get this right, man. Because I was so messed up. I was cold and shivering, and it just turned out I'd got it just perfect. The noose and everything. It was just, I went, and it pulled me back up. And naturally, the first thing you do, it was I was so desperate, I wanted to die. But as soon as it pulled me, I went to get myself free. I was panicking. I didn't want to die, actually. It was God, I actually don't want to fucking die. But I'd done it so well. And I just remember hanging there, and then just sort of, and then I lost consciousness until I was laying on the bed. I could hear shouting in the background, and I could see a light in front of my eyelids, and then opening, and it was this moment of am I dead? Am I dead here? And then realising it's the light on the ceiling of the prison cell. And it's the prison guards arguing, saying, when did you last check in?
Oh, God.
And I was and they literally just carried one by my arms, one by my legs, and just dragged me and put me in a padded cell. And I spent the next 2 weeks in a padded cell.
It's just so interesting though that you're in such a state, and you've tried to, you've gone through all of this crap in your life, and you're in prison, you've tried to kill yourself, and the first thing that came into your head was regret, kind of.
Yeah.
It was the first thing. It was regret, even though after you'd gone off the bed and you'd committed to it. Yeah. You just regret. You instantly just regretted it.
Instantly, I didn't want to die. And you think about all the stuff, all the people who had some positive influence in your life. That's what I thought about before I passed out. That's what I can remember is there's a character in my book called Mary. I thought about Mary, I thought about my mum, I thought about my dad, I thought about my brothers and sisters. And it's it's sad because if that prison guard never checked my cell, then the prison guard opened the flap on my cell door just because every couple of hours he's got to do the rounds and just check because we're all detoxing from drugs on this prison wing, and he just checked your flap and check you're still alive. If he didn't check then, this is why I believe in a higher power, because I think if he had been a couple of minutes either side, I would have been dead or severely brain damaged. But I just think of all the poor people that commit suicide that probably went through the same process I did. Panicked, didn't want to do it. And then you think of all the positive influence, all the people who've... It's just regret, Yeah, I think of Caroline Flack when I think of that. It's just heartbreaking where we are in humanity that, life's so painful that it's easier to kill yourself than to talk to someone.
So, Michael, this rock bottom then, a lot of motivational talkers, they speak about the very low point of your life and then you started to improve. For people then that live in a rich family, have great influences, it's sometimes easy for them to make a success because they've got great influences around them. And then people that are at the very bottom have got so much to go away from. What would your advice be for kind of the middle class, the people that are comfortable, aren't at the top, aren't at the bottom, would be?
Yeah, well, what I've learned is that even the people from very wealthy families have similar problems. They're just not as dramatic. And just because my life situation was really, really bad, it doesn't mean just because you've had a very nice privileged upbringing that your feelings don't count. Your feelings count just as much as mine. And I think your journey to happiness is the same as my journey, and it's all about understanding ourselves, communication, vulnerability, that's the journey. It's a journey for me from my head to my heart. That's the longest journey we have to make as human beings. Is when can I stop trying to intellectualize everything and listen to what my heart really wants? What does my heart really want to say? You know, and I think when we communicate from here, we don't want to be nasty and hurtful to people. We don't. You know, we want to be loving, kind, support each other and support the planet. So we all have to make that journey, no matter where your background is from. And I think wherever you're from, whatever class you're from, like, just reach out and find people to talk to. And, you know, the funniest thing is I've learned most from the people who aren't from my social background. When I've got talking to people who've had everything that I thought if I had, I would have been happy. And then I've met them and realised actually they struggled in a lot of ways that I did, you know? So make friends with people from all classes and you'll be surprised how a lot of our journeys are very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Thank you. Our first question, you've kind of proved it, haven't you?
Yeah.
That change is possible.
Yeah.
You know, I think you've proved that you've gone from literally like pretty much the lowest of the low to like the stuff you're doing now. Is it worth it, would you say, to someone that's, you know, like say a heroin addict, for example, right? You're talking to, or someone that's just really at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You've had to put in a lot of work to change, right? Is it worth it, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. 100% it's worth it. I mean, I live in Devon now, got 10 acres of land. You know, I don't have to work. I do a lot of this stuff for, you know, little pay because I care. And it's definitely worth it. But the one thing I will say is it's not easy. You know, like a lot of people are like, yeah, man, I really want to change. And as soon as it gets hard, they bail. You know, like, so, like, it's going to get hard. Change isn't easy. But it's so important that you change because, you know, I believe it's our responsibility to leave this planet and our little patch of earth in a better place than it was when we found it. Like, and even if it's just being a better dad than your dad was, or a better parent than your parent, like, that's a small change. But if you can then expand it out to your community and bigger, you know, and then do it. We need hope. We're at a difficult time in humanity. Climate change, suicide. People need hope. So share your gift. You know, your gift, your pain, when you come through it, if you can share that with someone, to the man who's still struggling, that how you got through that is a piece of gold to the man who's still struggling.
Michael, I think everyone listening to that will see that as a massive inspiration, and then rather than resorting to alcohol and drugs to make that change, then being 12 years sober, what would be a good escape for the people listening?
Yeah. So, you know, I think for me, I had to go through that journey of alcohol and drugs to figure out it wasn't for me. I think just have certain points in your life where you go, okay, now we've crossed the line.
Yeah.
You know, and hold yourself to account with that. You know, so, you know, one of them might be if this costs me a job, if this costs me a friendship, if I, you know, end up in police custody and I lose my freedom. Like, you need to have a certain line where you go, oh, I've crossed the line here and I need to knock this on the head. So have some healthy boundaries with yourself. I think that would be my advice on that one.
And looking back, like, you're here now, you're doing all these workshops and helping a lot of people, and I'm very grateful, so like these guys as well. But looking back at your life, do you regret anything that you've done?
Yeah, I do, mate. And it's hard because people say, well, you wouldn't be where you are today. And it was like, yeah, but you can't do all this work on yourself and develop this compassion and love for humanity and not want to go back and right all the wrongs that I done. You know, I caused a lot of pain, you know, and yeah, I had a bad start in life, but, you know, I've learnt to become responsible for my own life and responsible for my own emotions. So 100%, I mean, if I could go back and change a lot of the stuff, I would, and it would be mainly just letting the people down who cared about me. You know, I became very good at that, in letting people down who loved me. And that's one thing which I think might fuel what I do today is to make a lot of people who cared for me, like Caroline and Steve, they were mentioned in the book. Just make them proud, make people proud to say, look, you know, not only have I changed, I'm trying to help make a positive change in the world as well.
Well, thank you, Michael, for coming. You know, this has been excellent, and I hope that people listening can, you know, take something away from this, because we touched on a lot of like self-love and a lot of good topics, and I hope that they can like learn from you, and everyone can go read his book. Young Offender, recommend it. It's amazing. But thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.